Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Work Smarter, Not Harder, brought to you by Attendees and Crawford Group. My name is Heather Canepa, and I'll be your host for this session. Today's session is scheduled for approximately 45 minutes and is being recorded for future on-demand viewing. During the presentation, you may enter your questions at any time in the Q&A pod on the left-hand side of your screen. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Our presenters today are Aaron Saxby, VP of Sales and Marketing at Attendees, and Heather Meza, Director of Marketing and Services at Crawford Group. We also have a special guest from Adobe joining us. Sarah Ballard will be talking about how they have streamlined their partner program. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Heather Meza.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to chat with you and to work with Aaron on this presentation. So we want to kick things off with something fun. Can't help it. I'm an 80s girl, so gotta love 80s music trivia. Want to put a poll out there to all you guys and see, what do you think was the first video ever played on MTV? So we'll give you a second to just kind of put in your answer there. Was it Start Me Up, Video Killed the Radio Star, Hungry Like the Wolf, Money for Nothing, or Dancing in the Dark? All right, we're going to close the poll any second now. Great. All right. Let's go ahead and see our results. So as you may have guessed, many of you did, the correct answer is Video Killed the Radio Star. And it seemed at the time a very appropriate message given the onset of video and how disruptive it was to radio. And as we all know, it did not, in fact, kill the radio star. Radio is live and well and has even spawned something like podcasting as a hybrid approach to digital and radio in some ways. So in a lot of senses, in the same way that video did not kill the radio star, digital has not killed events. Events are here to stay. In a lot of ways, they're becoming even more valuable as we become more digitized in our everyday lives. People are valuing experiences over things more and more. And so, we're seeing things like budgets increasing. There's a few stats I'm sharing here that you can see. People are definitely investing just as much, if not more, in events, both online and in-person events. And so, we know that there's a lot of challenges that people are facing now as it relates to events that are a little bit more unique than they may have faced before, things got a little bit more complicated and the onset of social and digital and all these fun things that we as marketers get to deal with. And so when it comes to people and technology challenges, we're really finding that the common problems that we see out there as it relates to people is, a lot of folks, they've got the strategy and they've got the plan, but they don't have the right people to execute. It may just be, literally not enough people, or it may be that they don't have the right expertise because so much is changing so fast, and, you just have a lot of folks that can't keep up. And so you also run into situations, too, where you just, frankly, can't balance the workload or scale to meet all these needs because there's so much more complexity today than there was, say, even 3 to 5 years ago. In addition to that, you've got technology problems or challenges. And then over to Aaron.
So yeah, on the technology side, one of the biggest problems is tech moves very fast, and with that, inevitably comes change. And so the change that we are seeing in the space today with how savvy event planners are approaching events is actually very different than it was even a few years ago. So a good comparison would be how people are getting around the cities that we live in. 5 years ago, it would still be very common to go outside and stand on the corner and hail a cab. Now people go to their phones, launch Uber or Lyft, and basically go about their business until the car arrives. So that's really the kind of comparison that we're seeing in the event side of it, and that the technology is that people are now wanting to do things on their own terms and on demand versus kind of waiting around for the next steps and things to happen. So when approaching events today, there are really stark differences in goals and desired outcomes for different kinds of events. So knowing the best and most efficient way to approach, say, user conferences or webinars or training sessions, client events, or internal meetings is really going to make all the difference in creating positive outcomes for your attendees, but then also the event team, which is also an important piece. That leads to the second point. There are so many solutions on the market to choose from today that it can be quite overwhelming. So you've got full event management platforms like Attendease. There are also hundreds of add-on or niche solutions out there that help with engagement or scheduling, data collecting. So for any event, there could be as many as 5 to 10 different tools in play, which again gets very overwhelming and can be somewhat of a hindrance to being able to scale when you start looking at more and more events. So automation becomes a very big theme for 2018, and it will continue to be going forward as it helps enormously with time savings for repetitive tasks. The question I always ask is, why would you do the exact same thing over and over again when today, with modern event technology, there are ways to automate repetitive tasks, which can ultimately save organizations and individuals several hours per week or hundreds of hours per month if working in a very large global team. All of our days are super packed right now. There are seemingly fewer open windows on our calendars than ever before. So this movement to automation is really being welcomed because anything that can give us time in our day back is a prized resource, especially in the event world. As each day we get closer to an event, stress levels go up. Being able to automate and save some time is really huge. With that is that ability to scale on brand. That's probably one of the bigger benefits of automation. So large organizations that are planning hundreds or thousands of events all year, all over the world, one of the pressing issues for marketing departments is how to keep brand standards consistent for all of the event types. So having an ability to actually clone event websites or data from one event to the next really gives peace of mind that regardless of who's running an event or where it's being held, it can always be repeated on brand with really no additional effort to actually police it. So when we look at understanding your needs when it comes to the people or the technology, there are a few things that we want to really ask ourselves. And the first thing is really bucketing events into categories and then drilling deeper into each. So on the communication side, am I planning to send a few emails to launch and remind people, or do I need to reach out to my attendees on a much more regular cadence? Do I need to be able to schedule emails or breakout communication by path type? What kind of website do I require? Is it an event that requires multi-page, that's very robust, does a lot of storytelling, includes video and lots of imagery, or do I just need a single page website that is simple and clean, it gets people through the door as fast as possible? On the data side, what do I need leading up to the event and post-event? What actionable insight am I trying to collect from my attendees? Do I need to track them through the event? What sessions they're going to? How they're feeling? How am I going to handle on-site logistics like session scheduling or surveys and waitlisting, or making changes on the day of? Perhaps one of the most important items here is how are you going to define success? So if you plan to embark on rolling out any kind of technology, there needs to be a way to really measure it so that you can kind of say how successful this was to the organization. So, it's very important to work with whatever partner you choose to help define, what success looks like when you roll it out so that it can actually be measured. So, in saying all this, this would be a good time. I'd like to bring in our special guest, Sarah Ballard from Adobe, to join in the conversation and share a bit more about her experience with some of the points that have been discussed so far.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Heather. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Ballard. I work at Adobe on the digital experience side of the business, and I work closely with partners on enabling our digital consultancies and agencies who co-sell with us. We've been a client of Attendease in Crawford for a number of years, so I'm happy to be here today to talk about how we've used this technology and program management to onboard our online event strategy. So a few years ago when I was actually brought on to my team, we were really struggling to establish a program for online events The difficult thing with partners is, they need to have all the information that our internal field has, but we don't really have the mechanism to allow both internal and external audiences together. So what we had done was online events ad hoc and just, on a need-to-know basis, and it wasn't really a programmatic way of getting out information to our audience. So we needed a solution to not only streamline our online event management, but really establish a cadence. So we've been working with Crawford for a number of years on programs and other events, and so it was a no-brainer when we decided to onboard Attendease as our technology to bring them along and help them establish this program. So Attendease was great for us because we were able to not only integrate the solution into our partner portal so that our partners could see the events happen in real time, but we're able to manage everything together on the back end. So we have a holistic view of all of our events in one place, and we can do event management from the entire life cycle in one place. So that was awesome for us to not only begin, but also really just increase the number of events we're able to do with a limited number of resources. So as you can see on the slide, like last year alone, we increased the number and did over 75 online events, which was a 60% year-over-year increase. And that was done with primarily myself on the strategy side and content development side, and then Crawford on the execution side and getting this up and running, and of course Attendees on the back end with the technology. So we've seen, definitely increased attendance and engagement over the years, and on our side, just the efficiency and automation has been huge for us. So as you can see, the screenshot to the right is an example of an event we have coming up this month, actually. And as much as we like to plan these things in advance and get it all ready to go, this calendar of events, a lot of these things happen last minute. So we're able to use the templates that we have developed with Attendees, that's approved by our branding. And when we need to have tight turnarounds, we're able to do that. So it's been a great relationship that we've had and a great solution for our team. And we've recently decided to onboard using the solution for face-to-face events as well. So this past year, we've tested this out for a few events, and we're definitely expanding it to be the solution of choice for the remainder of our face-to-face events. So we will continue to use Crawford and Attendees for this, and we're looking forward to it. So please let me know if you have any questions for me on how we've used this, but I'll turn the time back to Heather and Aaron.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it. So, kind of jumping back over specifically talking about building that awesome team, when it comes time and you know that you need to do that, you've got a few different choices in terms of how you can approach that. Essentially, one of the things that you can do is you can partner with a vendor. The benefits to that are obviously, it can be fast and there's much more flexibility there. And it's also especially great to leverage vendors, niche vendors especially, for those unique and hard to find skill sets. And we're often finding that happening more and more as it relates to events where, you just don't necessarily have those skill sets in-house yet, and you want to be able to move quickly. So partnering with a vendor can be a really great way to make that happen. Also, you can, just bring on your own resources directly and do your own recruiting. I know in my history, I've had to do my own recruiting. It's always, just been default because it's free. So I think oftentimes it may not be a choice, but something we have to do. But it can be time intensive even though it's free. But it does also sometimes give you a little bit more control, and unfortunately it does oftentimes reduce your talent pool to a smaller size just because you're limited in terms of that expansion. And then the third option is really kind of doing a hybrid approach with both. You can leverage vendors to partner on direct hiring, so being able to actually help you with that recruiting piece, but bringing in direct hires, or even trying something where they're doing a contract to hire, where you get to test out the resources first. Sometimes that can be especially valuable because when you're adding resources to your team that have specialties and expertise that maybe you yourself are not very familiar with, having that third party help validate that can be really, really valuable. And then sometimes being able to have that time period to test them out can also be really, really valuable. And then, alternatively, you can always do something a little bit more like Adobe, where it's something like a managed marketing service. It's outsourced, and you've got, a real critical component happening there where people are managing it for you and able to do the execution in a really efficient and cost-effective way. So there's definitely a lot of different approaches to building your team that you can take, and, wanted to make sure that you guys thought through those as you're thinking through what makes the most sense for you. The types of vendors that you choose really makes a difference in terms of what your options are. So if you choose to actually partner with a vendor, there's kind of 3 different types of vendors that we see people partnering with. There's your traditional staffing agency, which is just going to really be best for those short-term assignments, maybe even people on site that you just need that kind of warm body to help you out. It could be less expensive, but sometimes it's more risky because, there's not really that involvement from the vendor. The staffing companies are really just making sure that someone shows up. They're not really making sure that the work gets done or that the outcome is what you want. But sometimes they're the right choice. Alternatively, people use marketing agencies, and we've seen marketing agencies be really great for that strategy and that kind of creative upfront point, but really they tend to be a little bit more expensive, and when it comes to executing, you may not want to spend your budget on the execution with a marketing agency. You may want to think about other options there. And then lastly, you've got workforce solution providers, and those are folks that really are looking at providing you with a customized solution that's going to be the most efficient and scalable one for you, and can look at doing some of those hybrid approaches and really being much, much more cost-effective than a marketing agency, a little bit more expensive than the staffing because there's a lot more value being added when you're working with those folks. So then you've really got to think about, okay, if I'm not going to get the benefit of being able to work with a vendor and I've got to do this myself, what are some of the things that we recommend that you really, really stay focused on and are going to help you do that recruiting yourself? So I've put together here a few do's and don'ts, and really a lot of these I think are pretty straightforward but extremely important. So on the do side, it's really making sure that you're planning ahead and defining the process up front. You don't want to be doing interviews and figuring out who's going to meet with who and what are the questions you're going to ask and what's the timing, etc. You want to make sure you've really thought all of that up front so that then you can focus your time on the actual recruiting. You want to be really specific about what you need, and that actually is true whether you're doing it yourself or you're working with a partner, really, because if you don't know what you value and what you need, it's going to be really hard for you to find that, and it's especially important to write this stuff down and think about it from a soft skill perspective as well as a hard skill perspective. And what I mean by that is not just, what are those skill sets or technologies that, people have, but, how do they get things done? What is their style of working? Is that going to be a good cultural fit for you? And then, you want to really think through setting a timeline for yourself and, be committed. Make sure that you are on a deadline and you really stick to it. Because it is going to be very hard to stay focused because it's not your day job, right? You've got a day job, and recruiting is something that can take up a lot of time. And then lastly, make sure that you're looking in the right places. Leverage social, and don't just leverage it from a perspective of, your company posting postings. Leverage it from a relationship perspective. Think about it in terms of, your own social network, your employees' social networks, really getting out there and helping broaden that exposure so that you can find the right people with the skill sets that you need. And then really when it comes time to thinking about the things that you shouldn't do, one of the most important things I would say is, don't judge a book by its cover. Really, really look through that resume. Don't just skim it. But also when you're interacting with people, leave your bias at the door. Try really, really hard to just take that person on, that merit in terms of the conversation that you're having and the answers to their questions and the skill sets. You may be surprised at some of the folks that you find when you take that approach. Don't forget that they're interviewing you. It's really important that you share and that you are a representative of that culture and those expectations that you want them to value equally. So, be prepared when you are in, and be responsive and be on time and all of those great things. Do not skip the references. When you're getting to that point and you think you've got the right person, take that time, check their references. And when you're checking references, make sure you've thought through the questions you're going to ask those references specific to the candidate. And what I mean by that is perhaps you've got a little bit of a concern about the candidate, like, that maybe they don't seem like they're, detail-oriented enough, for example. You don't just ask the reference, hey, are they detail-oriented? Because they're going to probably say yes, right? Because that's just, that's the nature of the game. What you want to do is structure that question in a way that's going to help answer the question without it being so directly. So take the time to really think through that first, because then you're going to get value out of that reference process. And don't forget to ask them, questions that are going to help you be more successful in leading those individuals. It's also your opportunity to learn more about the candidate in the sense of, how can you help them be more successful once you do hire them. And then lastly, don't shy away from video. It's, really, really valuable in this process. It can save you a lot of time and save the candidates time, and again, in terms of them interviewing you. Take the time to schedule video interviews and get to know people and see how they interact in different situations. It can be really, really valuable when you take that approach. All right. Now, I want to pause here and ask a poll. This is a true or false poll. So, do you think it is more expensive to use a workforce service provider than to hire someone? So, if it's more expensive, you want to say true. If you think if it's less expensive, you want to say false. So, what do you think? Is it true or false? Ah, look at that. Oh, here it's coming. Well, it looks like most people are selecting false. A few people think it is true. So let's take a look now. The answer is false. In fact, with the right vendor, the opposite can be true. You can actually save money if you partner with the right vendor, and this is based on some research that TopTall put together. They actually have a tool where they can estimate the differences. It is actually a lot more expensive to hire someone directly than just their base salary. There's so many more expenses that go into that, and so when you're thinking about your budget and you're comparing things, you've really got to make sure that you're looking at the big picture and not just that face value of hourly rate versus salary employee.
Okay, so the next kind of follow-up to that, now once you've got the the world-class team assembled, you've got all the right people, now we're looking at assessing the technology, and so going down this path, event logistics and goals are super important before we're actually diving into what that tech stack needs to be to actually back it all up. So, in the example of running a roadshow in 10 cities over the course of 2 months, the technology choices for this type of event, could be vastly different from doing a standalone, week-long conference for 10,000 people. So, in the roadshow example, repeatable websites, data cloning from one event to the next, repeatable email cadences, those things may take priority, where in the conference example, having, super robust, agenda or schedule builder, that may be the most important tool to manage, the complexity of scheduling hundreds of sessions across hundreds of rooms with hundreds of speakers. So being able to manage complexity of session conflicts and waitlisting to that event is also going to be more important and paramount to a roadshow where it's, you're looking at maybe, 10 or 20 people showing up per city. So, taking the time to really assess what is going to drive the most, efficiency and success is huge. Once we've analyzed the use case, it's time to identify who's actually going to be working in the tech. So what are they going to do once they're there? Those days where people that you need to give access into a platform and give full access to everything is sort of gone. Today's newer technology, there is enterprise user management and permission controls to ensure that your event and the event data is always safe, it's always secure, and really only accessible to the people that need to be working on it. So having the ability to determine what an individual or a team of people can do in the platform is super important, and having the power to enable this on your own should be the norm these days. If you're working with outside partners or with people that have very specific tasks, they need to access their core responsibility and really nothing else. So having that ability to assign permissions, and tasks really keeps everybody on point and focused on what they're actually there to do. So an example being, if you have a person on the team that's solely responsible for the marketing side of it, setting up the emails and sending it out, or someone that's assigned to managing surveys, that should really be all that they're capable of doing once they're in the platform. They don't need to see or concern themselves with really any other aspects of the event or any other events for that matter, unless you really take the time to grant the permission to do so. So really in the end, it's about setting up a well-managed and streamlined process that can actually scale across the organization. So when we get into the benefits, one of the things we've talked about already, and it's worth sort of repeating, is undeniably the benefits of working in modern technology is the time savings that come with it. I always like to compare adopters of modern event management platforms to people that use the Starbucks app when they're going to get a coffee. So I'm a coffee drinker. I know every morning on my way to work I'm going to grab a coffee. I go to the app, I choose my drink, I order it, I show up at Starbucks, I walk in up to the barista, and my coffee's waiting for me, it's ready to go. I grab it, I have a sip, and as I walk out, I look behind me and I look at all the people that are standing in line. And that's sort of the comparison I'd like to make now with what event management and the modern approach can do, is that I've wasted no time, I've done it all on my own, and I've got what I want. The same way those other people are still kind of waiting in line. They're still looking for that same end goal, but they're taking a very slow approach to get there. So there's really no need to be burdened by that anymore. Time saving is definitely one of the biggest advantages to this, especially in a world where everyone is tasked with too much already to fit into one day. Who would not want to get some hours in their week back? Automation is definitely the biggest savior to event planners everywhere. If you kind of imagine trying to plan an event in 15 cities, set to begin in 1 month, creating 15 unique websites and different schedules and all the registration forms, that's traditionally going to take hours and hours for each one of those, even though that they're virtually identical. So if you flip that around and imagine events 2 through 15, in just being able to click a couple buttons and have all those websites created and populated with all the right content, your tasks to manage those events are really just making subtle content updates and changes versus building out 15 events from scratch. So when you look at that across a larger organization, it can have a real huge impact. On top of the time savings, there's obviously other advantages. Consolidating tools into a central platform also keeps all the data in one location and allows things to scale and repeat for all users. Allowing other technologies in, like CRM or marketing automation or messaging tools like Slack, or being able to print badges from the platform. All of those being integrated into a central platform ultimately gives it superpowers because it becomes the conduit for all event-related action and really that single source of truth. Segmentation is another great win. Being able to seamlessly run multiple events of all types through a platform is powerful, but actually being able to segment these out in a logical manner, whether that be by business unit or by region or by event type or by event planner. I mean, there are so many different options for you to choose from. And also the ability to sign up people to each type of event or business unit is going to be key for efficiency and security and really allow for that repeatable brand experience, regardless if it's taking place, locally or halfway around the world. Finally, I think the last one would just be, knowing your attendees better. I mean, they are really the lifeblood of the events. The goal is always to learn as much about these people as possible. And also give them a positive experience when interacting with the brand. So giving attendees, an easy way to register for events is really top of mind for any organization. One of the biggest trends happening right now is along the concept of member profiles. So this allows companies to essentially fast track attendees through a registration process why not force them in to answer questions they've already provided the last time they registered? So that gets people through the door faster, conversions are higher, people are thankful that they're not having to complete another form. Also, on the organizer side, the ability to see the member profile is extremely powerful. If you can see an aggregated view of all of the events or all of the sessions or surveys people have participated in, year over year or event to event, it can actually be quite insightful to help, organizations better predict, who is a promoter or a detractor, who might be, in buying mode or perhaps looking to churn. So it gives you, deeper insight into people who are interacting with the brand, at all the events. So let's bring one last slide here, kind of to summarize it all. The first one, in terms of making things, very successful is, definitely take the time to do proper assessment and outline what would be truly ideal for your event situations, whether it is, multiple events or one large, conference. Really understand what you need to make yourself successful, and keep in mind that being mediocre is no longer acceptable. There's really no reason, if you're doing things the same way you were 5 years ago. I can guarantee you there are better tools out there, even if they're small ones in small places, that can make you more efficient. Two would be, do comparisons. And don't just think about the present, but look ahead as well. Understand, how, and what support looks like, and what's the onboarding situation look like. Is it going to be on your terms, or are you forced to take support in areas, because you have to, because the technology is limited or older. So those are all very, important things to consider, and just, be mindful of, being efficient throughout your day. And last would just be, advice is to avoid, long-term, contracts if at all possible, especially when there's no flexibility within them. There is a trend in the industry to sign into, long, 3 years or beyond, technology contracts. And one of the questions is what's in it for you? There's really no need to lock yourself into old technology that will be even older, 3 or 5 years out. So make sure that if that's something you're going to consider, you're working with very flexible partners that allow some maneuverability in that. Because, on the tech side, it is moving so fast, and you want to be able to move with the trend. So flexibility and working with the right partner is also extremely important. And I think with that, we can open it up for some questions.
All right, let's look here. All right, we have a question from Douglas. How important is it to hire a marketing provider or employee who has experience in event marketing? That's a really great question. I think part of it depends upon how much in-house experience you already have, right? So kind of what's your bench strength already, and where are you seeing gaps? Where is it that you need expertise that maybe you don't have? So it really is, one of those, I hate saying it depends, but unfortunately it really does depend, because every situation is so unique. I think, in most instances you're going to want some level of experience, but it may be that you are in an instance where the technology experience the person has is far more important than it having been for the event marketing industry or function. So, for example, they may have, a lot of experience in automation and marketing automation, but maybe not specifically for events, but you yourself have a lot of strength in terms of campaign building, so you're not as concerned, right? So you really want to take into consideration where you're starting from, where your gaps are, and then that'll help you understand what is going to be the best match for you. Great question. All right, why don't we move on to a question for Sarah Ballard at Adobe. Sarah, so what's the best benefit to outsourcing your webinar marketing team?
Well, besides peace of mind, I think the challenge that we had was meeting the needs of our partner community, and having a small team, we weren't able to scale with who we had internally. So I rely a ton on the Crawford team, more than I'd like to admit, but we have a great relationship, and the expertise that they bring really speaks for themselves and the results and the number of events that we've been able to do. So I think just the ability to scale and to fit within our budget.
Awesome. Great. Question for Aaron. Let's see here. What functions can be automated?
A fair amount. I mean, the biggest one I would say would be on the website side of it. So again, if you've got, say you've got a large 10-page website with a ton of content, and you've got an event the following year that's going to be very similar in nature, in terms of how you want to present it, but obviously the content's going to change. Being able to essentially reproduce that whole entire website with a click of a button, where you're just making subtle content changes is a big one. So websites for sure. Then we get into data from previous events. So when we look at leveraging some of the work or the data that we put into a past event, you can automate pulling in information like speakers, sponsors, schedule, email cadences. Some of our automation triggers also include like your Salesforce connections or HubSpot or some of the stuff on the marketing automation side. So there's a fair amount in the platform that you can automate from one event to the next quite easily.
Awesome. We have another question for you, Aaron, which is, does the platform integrate with CRMs like Marketo?
So currently, at least the Attendease platform integrates with Salesforce and HubSpot. We have Marketo and Eloqua scheduled for integration next quarter. And we also have an open API as well. So those capabilities are yet very, very near to being in the platform.
Awesome. All right. One last question. Aaron, where are the biggest time savings that you see from a technology perspective?
So I think, again, depends on the event type. So we've got customers like South by Southwest who, if you can imagine that event through downtown Austin, all of the sessions and all of the venues that are in play, time savings for them is working in a very efficient, scheduler. So something that they can manage all the different rooms and all the different venues, and effectively manage conflicts with speakers or times, or for them that's a huge time saver versus what they were trying to do in the past. For other clients, is the ability to replicate event experiences. So I think of that the concept of a similar type of event series or a road show where 80-90% of what you're presenting out to the market is very similar in nature. Again, being able to reproduce all of that with the click of a button and just work on the 20-15% of what's unique about it is also a big time saver. So I think kind of depends on your use case, but there's opportunities kind of across the board when looking at a modern tool.
Great. Well, thank you all so very much for attending. Aaron and I would like to, extend you an offer here from Attendees, where if you want to take advantage of one of these two options, just reach out directly to Aaron at attendees.com. You can run an event up to 500 attendees for a flat fee, or get 20% off. So definitely take advantage of that. I'd also really like it if you guys would follow Crawford Group on LinkedIn. And we also have a great program at Crawford Group where you can help your friends find marketing jobs. And this is open to anyone. So please check this out. We actually offer $500 to anyone who can help someone get a job. So definitely take a look at that. And with that, again, I'd like to thank you all for attending today and hand it back over to Heather.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather and Aaron, for your presentation today. This does conclude today's webinar. I did want to point out that you can download a copy of the slide deck in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen in the resources section. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.